All right, welcome back to the Transgender School podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us again. And we are very, very excited to welcome very special guests today, Paria Hassouri and Ava Hassouri. So this will be the first time for all of us having a conversation, two moms and two daughters who've had our unique experiences, some of which may be similar and some parts of our stories may be different. So we thought it would be really interesting for all of us to come together and just have a great open-ended conversation about our experiences and what we learned and what we want to share with our very wonderful audience who's out there wanting to learn with us. So I will take a moment to just introduce Paria and Ava, and then I want to turn it over to them to see what they'd like to add to that introduction that I may have left out, because I'm sure I will leave some out. So Paria, I know that you are a happily married mom of 3, which is amazing to me because 2 kids, I could barely handle 2. Yeah. You went for the 3rd. Good for you. You are a very beloved and respected and pediatrician, which is an amazing career. You are a well-loved author as well. Your book, Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change, came out in 2020. Congratulations. And you are also a writer in multiple publications, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Huffington Post, Washington Post, about motherhood, being the mother of transgender daughter, life, balancing it all so much. You're also an avid runner and yoga practitioner, one of those people who just does it all. I don't know how you do it. And you and I came to know each other in our support group, which we both love and appreciate very much. It's helped us along this journey, Transforming Family. So big shout out to Transforming Family. And you and I, Paria, got to present together as parents talking about family support for transgender youth at the EDGY conference, Embracing the Diversity of GLBTQ Youth and Families. And that was a great day. I loved spending that day with you. Now, Ava, we're going to learn more about you probably from your mom, if that's okay with you, who will tell us more about you. We don't know as much about you yet, but we do understand that congratulations are in order, that you are going to be attending Yale in the fall. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Are you excited?
I'm super excited.
We are awesome. So yes, that is amazing. You've got to be really, really smart to get into Yale, right? And we know that you are. Your mom talks about that a lot. So it's not a big surprise, but it is still very, very exciting. So we want to say congratulations. And we thank you for coming on the show with us today. Is it true that this is the first interview you've done with your mom?
Yeah, it's always just been her, but I'm tagging along for this one.
I love it. Well, we are so grateful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So we'll start off the questions. I'll go ahead and start. We're going to start pretty open-ended, and we might take turns with me asking Paria questions and Jackie asking you questions, Ava, since you're kind of coming from similar perspectives. So we just want to start open-ended and say, that we'd love to hear your story, Paria. Like, what, if you don't mind just kind of summarizing for us. I know you've told this story many times in your interviews, but for our audience, if you could share what it was like for you when Ava came out. I think it was about 4 years ago. Very different experiences because our kids were different ages, but we're kind of on the same timeline, that it was about 4 years ago. Can you give us kind of your little summary of what that was like for you?
Yeah, so Ava came out in May of 2017, so it's hard to believe that it's almost 4 years now. And she was 13 and a half. And when she came out, I thought that this was the most devastating thing that could possibly happen to me. And I reacted terribly. And I didn't believe her. So I would say my initial reaction wasn't actually grief as much as it was really anger that this kid who wasn't trans was saying she was trans to get my attention, and I didn't have time for it. So I really had probably the worst, I feel like I didn't have a like, I'm going to throw you out of the house kind of reaction, but it was like, there's no way you're trans. I would have known if you're trans. And okay, that's fine. We'll get a therapist who will confirm that you're not trans, and we'll move on with our lives, was sort of my attitude. And then kind of went on from that anger, denial, to starting to realize that this wasn't going away and maybe it was true. And then I think I experienced the greatest grief I've ever experienced, and took about 6 to 9 months for things to start to change for me. And now I just think that's all crazy. I can't, it's we're so not in that place. I almost don't recognize, it's interesting. I wrote my memoir while things were still happening, and a lot of it is going back to diary entries. And I think if I hadn't written it then, I wouldn't have been able to write it, because I'm so far from that those extent of those feelings I had is just sort of unbelievable to me at this point.
Yeah.
And but we are in a very good place, and really I think our relationship is better than it's ever been. And it's been for me really such an enriching experience to be really introduced to all these people I didn't know about. Just the whole thing has been pretty incredible and pretty life-changing. So
yeah. And we definitely understand how meaningful it can be to kind of go from that place of not accepting to coming full circle and going beyond just acceptance to advocacy. So no, it's really amazing that we're all here today. And I just would love to get your perspective, Ava, on, obviously your mom has shared this story a lot of times, but this is the first time you're coming out and doing an interview with her. So what was this like for you during this period where your parents had not come around yet, where they were still struggling to accept you and you were still having to advocate and fight for basic things like who you are? How did that feel? How do you remember that time?
I mean, when I came out in May 2017, I didn't think I was really dropping a bombshell piece of information. I thought I was just telling them something, and, they have queer friends, so they're going to be fine with this, and we'll start making changes. So when I was met with shock and disbelief, I didn't really know how to proceed. I felt my own sort of grief for a while after I came out to my parents, because I felt like I couldn't really be around them. I didn't feel much trust with my parents anymore, because if I can't trust them with this huge piece of information, then, why else would I go to them with other secrets? So from then on, I asked if I could paint my nails. I asked if I could shave my legs. And every time I would just get no's. So I just did it anyway. I stole one of my mom's razors and shaved my legs. I had friends paint my nails when we hung out and tried to hide them from you. I remember I had a friend only do my left hand because I thought that would be somehow more okay than doing both hands. But slowly, as I was starting to force these changes, my parents, they didn't stop them. They definitely didn't approve, but they weren't doing anything to stop me. So I kept going. I started purchasing more feminine clothing and buying a bunch of Rite Aid makeup and showing up to school with a ton of makeup in my backpack and putting it on after PE, looking like a completely different person than when I got to school. And then eventually, eventually I asked you if I could go to buy leggings and t-shirt dresses, which are really just big shirts. And I think that was the first step we really took together. That was the first time that I did something and got some sort of consent.
yeah, that's like, for me, even now, all these years later, for me to hear her describe that, she felt like she couldn't trust us is really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And do you feel like rebuilding that trust? Because I definitely relate to that, feeling like there was a breach of trust. And I feel like that was something that definitely had to be rebuilt over time. And now, obviously, years in the future, I look back and I can easily say that that trust has been rebuilt. But did you feel like it was a gradual process and like it took a while to rebuild that trust?
It definitely took a long time. I mean, for at least like almost a year after coming out, it still took me like I still wasn't fully forgiving my parents for how they reacted to when I came out, because I was still thinking that it was a very me-centered event. I wasn't really thinking how they would be processing it. And so I was pissed that they were telling me I wasn't trans, and I still wasn't ready to fully forgive them for that. It was definitely a very big gradual process to rebuild the trust that I have with them now.
Totally. That makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
obviously now we're both almost 4 years after coming out here with parents who both at first thought we were surely not actually trans. And here we are 4 years later, still trans. So knowing that, what would your advice be, Ava, for parents of trans kids who might be where our parents were at 4 years ago? What would you say to them?
Just listen to your kids, because worst case scenario, you go and see a gender therapist, and then they realize that they don't want to transition, or that they're not trans, and then it's behind you. You know, the least you can do is just listen to your kids. But if your child, like, has the courage to come out to you as trans, and you tell them that you don't believe them or you reject them, it's soul crushing. So yeah, the least you can do is just listen to them.
Thank you.
Ava, if I can ask, thank you for being so open, Ava. It's, it's it feels very similar to the things that the conversations Jackie and I are having now. And I know for Paria and myself, it hurts our heart to know, that we hurt you, and mother never wants to hurt her child. And we can see it all so clearly now. And in the beginning, I don't know. We're just clouded, and it's not right. So thank you for sharing this. And I really know that parents and others listening will benefit a lot, from what you're sharing. And I just, wonder, and I still ask Jackie about this, and I think you two probably have these conversations, like, I wonder still, is all really forgiven? How, are there still trust issues? Am I still, can I say I'm sorry more? And Jackie's always like, stop saying you're sorry, And when I look at you two, as I follow you on social media, and you seem really, really close, like, I love seeing pictures of you two, and I love seeing, Paria, you posting about Ava, is going to go to Yale. And like, it brings tears to my eyes when I see posts like that for such personal reasons. I know you can relate, Paria, because it's like, there's some redemption in seeing even other parents that made the mistakes that I made and now feeling so close. So Ava, does it feel like, like you two have healed that, and like you feel close to your mom? Because also I know that when your child goes away to college, it's hard and you really want the relationship to be like solid. And Ava, I guess I want to believe and know that that's really real. Like, things are healed, and you and your mom are as close as you appear to be. It just looks so beautiful.
Yeah, don't worry, it's all real. As soon as it took a while for me to really, like, go back and analyze my coming out. But when I realized, especially after reading your memoir and seeing it from your perspective, that it wasn't just difficult for me. This is also earth-shattering news for my parents. So once I really learned to understand that they were going through just about as much as I was that night, I was able to forgive them. And yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
I know it is. I know. I just love hearing it. I'm sorry. I'm asking selfishly because I'm still asking, like I said, Jackie all the time, like, we're good, right? We're good. And I think it's soothing for us. I don't know, Paria, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I think, it's interesting because a lot of people will tell me, like, you should forgive yourself, like, especially when they read my book, they're like, gosh, like, it's clear how much guilt you feel about how you handle things. And, this would be shocking to any parent, and that you should forgive yourself. And, I think, I remember, like, my growing up, I mean, especially in like middle school and high school, home was the one place where once I stepped foot in the door, I felt comfortable and safe. And so to think that, there was a time where she stepped in the door and was maybe feeling safer at school than at home is is
Mhm.
really, hard. I mean, I have forgiven myself,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is really hard
Yeah.
to sort of realize that and come to terms with that. And I think, um, I mean, part of writing the book, I think, was my like attempt at like making a difference to make up for,
Mhm.
to at least partially
Mhm.
make up for the mistakes that, I
Yes.
made, kind of thing. And it's been interesting because some of the feedback that I've heard, from a lot of young trans adults who've read it and said, it kind of gave me a little window into what my parents experienced and opened some
Mhm.
conversations between, me and my parents that we hadn't had.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
which is really obviously means, a lot to me. But
Yeah.
I think she's probably forgiven me.
Mhm.
I've mostly forgiven myself, but there's certain things that I just
Yeah.
um, still hold on to, and it's so.
Yeah, same here. I appreciate your honesty about that, Paria. And that's something, we talk about in our support group and in our, we have a pretty nice community of moms. I think you and I are part of. However often or infrequent we see each other, there's that shared understanding and like this attempt to heal and forgive ourselves and learn and grow and also help others to understand, and I'm wondering, I just want, we know that our experience is informed by all our influences, cultural, religious, family, everything, and you have a unique experience that you talk about a lot in the book also, and and I find quite fascinating and significant that you grew up, part of your growing up was in Iran, and part of your time you grew up here, and you struggled to fit in and find your place culturally, and especially here in the US. And how do you think that impacted your, feelings about Ava and her transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you've spent most of your life on feeling like you're on the outside and that you need to prove yourself and,
Hmm.
prove that you're good enough and prove that you're an American and that you belong here. Um, which still is ongoing and really got exponentially worse during the Trump years.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the last thing you want for your child, and then your child,
Hmm.
comes out during Trump years, and
Hmm. Hmm.
um, I mean, it's just, there's just that's like the last thing you want is for your child to then potentially have an even much harder time than you did.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a lot of that, just
Hmm.
fear about
Yeah.
what her future was going to be, and was she going to
Hmm.
spend her life trying to prove herself as a woman, and
Hmm.
how exhausting it can be to spend your life, trying to prove your worth and prove that you belong, and that you're who you say you are, because I felt like I spent my whole life saying like I'm a good person and an American, not
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
like evil Muslim terrorist, like
Hmm.
there's always felt like a
Hmm.
need to, um, to like walk in and be like extra friendly, or, like
Hmm.
look non-terrorist or whatever.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you don't want your daughter to just walk in and be judged immediately before anyone talks to her.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah. Jackie, do you have follow-up questions?
Yeah, well, I think that just perfectly plays into a theme that we talk about a lot in our courses, which is just how so much of the difficulty when someone comes out and transitions has to do with our social roles and our expectations of who is supposed to play what role, and what role we're supposed to play, and what roles we're responsible for making sure our children play, and how we have to let go of that. And that's a difficult process for us psychologically. We have to let go of a piece of our ego in that way. And I just feel like it's definitely a process that both the parent and the child have to go through together, each kind of doing their own part of the journey. And as much as I appreciate the fact that I think Ava and I definitely both fully forgive our parents and have moved on, I want to ask, just because I think there's something that maybe it was a slightly different experience for us because we came out at different ages and we're in different places in our lives. I was living by myself in an apartment. I wasn't living with my parents when I came out, but I felt like just the process of um, coming out and having to advocate for myself, coming out and not having acceptance right away, and just going through those and that initial phase that was really hard, kind of matured me. Like I feel like I kind of came out on the other end of it like a different person. Like it was a very formative life experience, not just in terms of transitioning and being who I am, but just learning to deal with anxiety and social shame and learning to deal with people misgendering you or dead naming you and dealing with those emotions. And so I would just love to hear your thoughts, Ava, on like how that changed you as a person, just going through that experience and how you feel you came out on the other side of it.
It definitely matured me a lot, especially for my first semester of high school. I still had no parental support, so I really had to learn how to advocate to myself for myself. I had to email my counselor and ask to have accommodations for PE because I didn't want to change with the boys. Wasn't getting any help with that from my parents, and it was when it was doing that. I didn't even tell you until the end of the school year. You didn't even know that I was changing in a completely separate area because I just realized that I need to learn how to function on my own because I don't have my parents behind me anymore. So it it's grim, but it did definitely help mature me. It made me a lot more independent than I was at the time. And I was only 13 or 14 around then. So
Yeah.
it felt like I was being forced to grow up a lot faster than the people around me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't, it's really different for us. Yeah. Because Jackie was 19. So I don't know what I would have done. I don't
Right.
know. Yeah. It's really, you were so young, and to advocate for yourself in that way. And did you find your school fairly accommodating when you made those requests?
My school, in terms of administration, they were great. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even you were pulling me in and out of therapists, but
Mm-hmm.
I, in the meantime, set up weekly sessions with my school's counseling team because I wasn't really finding the therapy outside of school helpful since I was getting
Mm-hmm.
moved around into new different therapists like every
Mm-hmm.
month. So the school was definitely really helpful. The
Mm-hmm.
most difficult thing really was the name. I mean, I wasn't even going by a different name freshman year. And then
Mm-hmm.
sophomore year, I mean, we were all set on the name Ava, but
Mm-hmm.
they still wouldn't change it in their system until I had it legally changed. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really obnoxious. But other than that,
Yep.
the school has been outstanding.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another part of the process that I know a lot of trans people, I personally feel was really essential for me was getting to know other trans people and being around other trans people, especially when I was first coming out and first transitioning. And I just imagine that probably was easier for me being 19, living by myself in San Francisco versus being,
Mhm.
in a school where you're kind of in a fixed environment with the same group of people every day. And you might not have a lot of other trans people around you. So was that something you experienced, and how did you manage to kind of find support among other trans people?
Yeah, I mean, at my school, there was one trans guy in the grade above me, and we didn't have anything in common except that we were trans and our parents didn't support us. But
Mm.
we didn't really ever become friends. We just said hi in the halls. And then other than that, I didn't have anybody. I would read through trans like Reddit forums and Instagram
Mhm.
posts, and
Mhm.
I didn't make online friends, but I felt connected to a sort of online community just by reading all of those posts and even posting my own on Reddit. But I didn't, until I went to Transforming Family, I didn't know other trans people. It was
Mhm.
just me on my own.
Mhm.
And
And what
having that,
was,
oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, what was that like for you then, Ava? Because transforming family is, for us as parents, it's been amazing and so helpful. And I would love to hear what it's like for you as in a peer group, a peer support group.
it was a very big upheaval going for the first time because
Mm-hmm.
it was it was my first time getting to hang out with other trans people, and we largely weren't talking about trans things. I mean, I was just sitting in a circle of about seven trans femmes, and we were
Mm-hmm.
just chatting about like trivial things like food.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt so happy to be able to exist with other people that were
Mm.
similar to me. It was
Yeah.
something that I'd never had access to before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when we went to the first time she went, and um, we were going to meet afterwards in the lobby, and I walked out of the room, and she hadn't seen me, and I just saw her face, and I was like, oh, you know,
Mm.
Yeah.
oh, she's trans,
Yeah.
because there was this
Yeah.
look on her, and it was like,
Yes.
it
Yep.
was like just this like awakening look on her face, like she'd
Yes.
been with her people. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like a moment where I was just like, oh shit, this is
Yep.
Yeah.
totally real.
Another
Yep.
big thing about transforming family is that I learned that trans people can be beautiful. I just had
Oh.
myself to go off
Mhm.
of, and I did
Yeah.
not look very good at the time, trying to navigate how to present femininely while
Mm-hmm.
still being very dominated by male puberty. So
Mm-hmm.
seeing other trans
Mm-hmm.
people further along in their journeys that actually looked attractive was really big for me because
Yeah.
it gave me hope that I could end up looking like a pretty girl at some point.
Yeah. What a
I think you
beautiful
definitely
statement.
succeed, but yeah,
Yes. I agree.
it
We
always
all
helps. It always
agree.
helps to be able to look a few years in the future and be like, okay, those hormones do something, huh?
Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I cut you off earlier, Jackie. Did you have a question that
Oh no, I was just gonna follow up by asking Ava, like, you shared your thoughts for parents whose trans kids might be just coming out, but I'm curious what your advice would be for trans kids, especially trans kids who were around your age when you came out, and how you would recommend they handle it.
Hmm. I would say that if you are at all able to explore in your free time, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
I mean, I wasn't allowed to go and get makeup and lipstick and whatnot from Rite Aid, but I still did it. I got a bunch of really, really bad eyeshadow and nail polish, and as soon as my parents went out to dinner, I would hide in my bathroom and put it all on. And then when they got here, I would take a bunch of pictures and take it all off. If you
Mhm.
have any access whatsoever to
Mhm.
any form of exploration, please, I implore you to try it out because it
Mhm.
feels so amazing, especially if if you're like me and your parents don't accept you when you come out. It feels really amazing to just get to step into who you want to be for a night.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect advice. I totally remember, like, for me, it was Target. I would like go do a Target run and just like buy all these cheap women's clothes and makeup and come home after class and get dressed and put all this makeup on and wipe it all off and go back out. Yeah, I that brings back a lot of memories for me.
And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I know that question was directed towards Ava, but I think we were fortunate, like she found a teacher that she could come,
Mhm.
because it's not safe for every kid to come out, to their
Yeah.
parents. And
Mhm.
fortunately, she was able to find a couple of teachers that she felt comfortable like coming out to. So
Mhm.
like trying to find a safe person that you can
Mhm.
confide in is
Mhm.
so important. So
Yes.
I'm so now, like, I remember I was so mad at the teacher who called us in Thailand to say that, um, that, Ava told her that, she was trans. And I was so mad at her. And I was like, who does she think she is? Like, she doesn't know my
Mhm.
kid. And now I'm so incredibly grateful that she was there and a safe person that Ava could talk to. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until like 2 years later that I emailed her, and I was
Mhm.
like, I don't know if you know who I am, but my child like came out to you, and of course she knew who I was. And so I mean, it took me 2 years to actually acknowledge what an important person she had been in Ava's life,
Mhm.
and to finally send her a long email saying, I'm so grateful you were there. And I'm so
Mhm.
sorry that, you know, when you first told me, I just wasn't ready to receive it. And she sent me back this like long email, like, you know, it was, you know, that it just meant so much to her that,
Yeah.
you know, I took the time 2 years later to thank her
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
being
Yeah.
there for my child, you know?
Yeah.
So like find a safe person.
Mhm. 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 Well,
That's
yes,
great advice. Yeah.
absolutely. And let's build on that because Paria, you know, we've shared so much about the beginning of the story, but the years in between and where you are now, you know, you and I very much want to be advocates, and we are advocating, and we're sharing a lot out there in the world in multiple ways, writing and social media, and you know, and so can you share with us now, you know, what messages are most important for you as an advocate for transgender youth and transgender people, which you very much are in the world, and also as a pediatrician? You know, I'm curious because you're caring for children, and I'm wondering if that comes into your practice as well. Like what's most important for you to teach the world now, and how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to teach the world. And I feel like from, I don't know if from May of 2017, you know, we've come, I mean, we've definitely in a different place than we were
Mhm.
4 years ago. I mean, just, you know, the US in terms of our awareness
Mhm.
about, you know, gender. And, but I also know that I have a very biased news feed, you know, that,
Mhm.
you know, my
Mhm.
news feed, you know, where you know, I'm
Yeah.
bombarded with trans issues is probably very different than most, you know, other people's, you know, news feed. So
Mhm.
I don't really know, you know, how much is really that we've made so many advances in visibility versus I'm
Mhm.
just getting, you know, a skewed sort of viewpoint.
Right. Right.
I think you know, for me, I mean, part of writing the book, I mean, I think the main thing, at least when Ava came out, was that I felt like all the narratives about trans people were that trans people present in childhood. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you know, the idea that you don't know, you know, it never occurred to me that like I wouldn't know my child's gender. Like it
Mhm.
was more possible to me that like my child would like get in a horrible car accident and die. Like that's in the realm of things you like imagine, but you
Mhm.
don't even imagine that it's a possibility that you don't know your child's gender, you know? So
Mhm.
like, I think for people just to realize, I mean, I think we're a lot more comfortable with the idea that we don't know our children's sexuality because,
Mhm.
you know, that may not make itself evident until they're, you know, preteen or teen or later, but we
Mhm.
think we know our children's gender. And so I think people should just know that, you know, gender is a spectrum and, you know, it may present and evolve at different times. And so,
Mhm.
you know, just have that in the back of your mind,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
what, you know, that you don't, you don't know your child better than they know themselves.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, that's definitely something we know all too well because as my mom can tell you, one of the pretty much the first thing she said when I said I'm not sure about my gender identity, she said, "You mean your sexual orientation?" I was like, "No, gender
I
identity."
know.
But
You know, just like you, Paria, I just look back on that moment like, what was I thinking? Like, I just didn't get it. I didn't get it. And I got it. I thought I understood the concept as far as other people's kids and other people, but not my kid. So yeah, I couldn't process it. And I thought she was telling me she's gay because
and
like
isn't it true that the average age is also like 18 or 19 that
mhm,
people come out to? So that's
it
something that
is.
I feel
Yeah.
like not nearly enough parents know.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So yeah, I don't know about you, Paria, but I feel pretty different about things like gender reveal parties now. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. They make me, you know, cringe. I mean, just, yeah. The
Yeah,
genitalia reveal parties is basically,
exactly. Yes, that's what they should be called. And like you don't know. And Jackie knows people, you know, I think it's so fascinating to look at. You're right. Like in our worlds, we're in LA, San Francisco, like things really have changed, and we're in communities where there's like so much support and education, but it's not like that everywhere, you know. And I know Jackie knows people who are actually raising their kids to like with the philosophy that you'll tell us what your gender is when you figure it out, and like non-gendered upbringing, and you know, that maybe that's where things are going. I don't know. Do you see that changing as a pediatrician, or do you think we still have a pretty long way to go on that front?
I mean, I think we still have a really long way to go on that front.
Mhm.
But I do think, I mean, I do think, yeah, I think they call it like, I've heard the term babies, you know, if you're
Oh, I haven't
they're
heard that.
raising a gender neutral baby is a baby, and they use they pronouns for their babies from the beginning.
Oh,
Yeah, I've heard of that, but I think just this idea of just becoming aware of how much we impose gender on our kids in subtle ways that we don't even realize we're doing,
Mhm.
and just trying to take away some of that, even if we're not going
Yeah.
to like raise our children as a they be or totally gender neutral, but just
Mhm.
realizing all the subtle ways that we impose certain gender roles and norms on our kids, rather than
Yeah,
just giving the freedom to be whoever they want to be.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look back now, and with Jackie, it was everything we bought her was trucks and Legos, and
Mhm.
it was all the boy toys. And I never considered not doing that or asking her, would she like something different? And that's just, it's kind of, you just follow what you see everyone around you doing. Was that your experience too, Ava, that you felt growing up, like the gender expectations were very clear?
Yeah, it was just cargo shorts and Hot Wheel cars.
Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't been forgiven for the cargo shorts and the Crocs.
Oh,
Well, that's a whole, that's a
I wore a
fashion
lot of
issue.
cargo shorts.
I remember they were
You bought me
easy, you know.
a lot of Old Navy cargo shorts.
Hmm.
And the
Well,
zip offs, the cargo pants that zipped
oh
off halfway
yes,
down and
yeah,
turned into
yeah,
shorts.
yeah. I don't know if Ava may have been a little young at that time, but those are big when you were that age, and they made life easy, you know. But now we look back in hindsight, you can see all the things that
I
we
think,
did.
you know, one of the things was, you know, I have a younger daughter. So, I mean, by the time Ava was 3, we started having, you know, quote, girl
Mm.
toys, you know, all over our house, but
Mm-hmm.
she didn't gravitate towards it. And I mean, I think um, who knows what that is? I mean, it could just be, I mean,
Yeah,
toys are toys, you know,
yeah.
who's to say, you know, and
Right, right.
or could it just be that she felt this expectation that she shouldn't play with them? I mean, who knows, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Mm-hmm.
was certainly around in our house, and
Yeah.
we never showed an
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah,
So
Well,
I
and I
mean,
feel like that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ava.
oh, I just wanted to speak on that because I know the
Mhm.
answer.
Yes.
I didn't feel trans when I was like 5, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to stress that not all trans people know they're trans like
Yes.
when they're like 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely fine with playing with cars and wearing Minecraft
Mm-hmm.
shirts and cargo shorts because that was just
Mm-hmm.
that I liked doing that. You know, I didn't really start to question everything until like 7th grade. So
Mm-hmm.
it's while some trans kids do end up gravitating to the opposite gender clothes or toys, that wasn't the case for me just because I didn't really figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Thank you
think
for
it's
saying
so
that. That's important.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
I
different
really
for
appreciate
everyone.
that because it's
Mhm.
so important to highlight that yeah, trans people don't have any obligation or any reason to perform a specific gender role any more than a cis person would. Like
Right.
just like there are cis women who, you know, when they're little girls might not want to play with stereotypical girls' toys. Just because you don't want to play with girls' toys, that doesn't mean that you're not trans. And yeah, I totally remember I didn't feel trans either. I feel like I couldn't feel trans because I didn't understand that trans was even a
Yeah.
concept at that age, you know. I definitely didn't understand. There were subtle things where it was enforced, like I wanted to grow my hair out, but I wasn't allowed to grow my hair out. And then I asked once if I could get earrings, and that was a hard no. But no, it's so important to point out that just because someone's not putting on dresses or wearing the clothes of the gender that they weren't assigned at birth, that doesn't mean that they're not trans. That doesn't mean that that gender identity is any less valid, because still today, I wore a lot of makeup when I was first coming out, because I think I felt like I had to prove something, and I had to prove that I was a woman, and I didn't want to get misgendered, and I wasn't on hormones for as long and all this stuff. But now that I'm more comfortable with myself, I don't really wear makeup very often ever. I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've worn makeup in the past year. So I think it's really important to highlight that, just as cisgender people have very diverse gender presentation, so do trans people.
Yeah. 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 Well, so I think we've covered most of what we plan to cover, but I'd love to just ask another open-ended question as we, as we start to kind of move to wrapping up, and just knowing that our audience is very diverse, which is wonderful. We have a lot of folks listening who are teachers, who are parents of trans kids, trying to learn earlier in the process, as you and I tried to devour as much information as we could in the beginning. Paria, lots of parents, some trans folks, lots of people who really wanted to learn and be allies and advocates. So any final messages for them about how we can all work to create awareness and understanding and true equity in the world? And we know from the news and all of what we're seeing, that this is something that is top of mind for many folks right now, whether they're the folks on the other side of us who are trying to, get legislation passed to take away trans rights, or people like us who are on the other side fighting for the trans rights. Like, what do you most want people to know and do? Either of you, both of you, final thoughts from each of you, whoever wants to go.
I mean, I think for me, the whole reason to just be visible is so that people can just see that having a trans kid is not any different than having any other kid, and that there's no reason like our relationship is like, any other mother-daughter, relationship, all of which are unique, and, they all have similarities and they all have uniqueness, and that, my family's not any different than any other family out there, and that there is absolutely no reason why my child shouldn't have the same rights as every other child in the US. I mean, I think really that's the point of visibility, is just to show people that we're not any different.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that, being trans is just a fact of my being, in the same way that liking books is a fact of my being, and being 5'6" is a fact of my being. And for all of these parts that make me, some of them need accommodations, and, like, if someone, I mean, this is a rough analogy, but if someone can't see well, you give them glasses, you need to support people who just have things that are true about them. I just am trans,
Very well said.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep. That's what people need to embrace and understand right now in this world today. So thank you for coming on to share that with us. And yes, and Paria and I agree. And I love your, social media posts. I remember one where you and Ava were just kind of hanging out, reading together. And you're like, this is what a mom and her trans daughter look like. And it was like, you would see any other mother and daughter. And I feel that in your message, and it's a good reminder to me as well. And I think that's what Jackie and I, we always joke about how we do these podcasts and we do webinars and we do all these things talking about being trans, but when it's just me and her, we don't really talk about her being trans. It's probably similar for you two. We're talking about politics or school or books or whatever it might be. But when we're out in the public eye in this way, we feel called to kind of make sure people know, look, we're just a regular mother and daughter like anybody else. And that's how we want you to see all trans people. keeping in mind what Ava shared, that just like any other unique individual might need some medication or certain types of, support, that should be 100% accessible, just like it would for anyone else in any other kind of situation. So thank you for articulating that so beautifully. And I agree with you. Jackie, final thoughts?
I think you both said it all, Paria and Ava. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. I really appreciate this conversation. And hopefully it will help someone who's listening, whether that's a parent of a trans kid, a trans person, sibling, friend, anyone else out there. So thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Yes, it was a great
for having us.
conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.